Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Honestly, Let's Talk. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each week I look to bring to you a variety of voices to talk about a variety of topics. We've had a lot of great discussion over the last couple months, and when I was planning this conversation, I knew that with everything going on in our world right now, 5 voices that I wanted to hear from were for some police officers who are doing the work and are doing great work. We did have another guest that was going to be on with us tonight, but as expected, there are sometimes things that pop up with this career that has you going out and having to deal with those. So I'm very grateful for my 4 guests that I have here tonight, but I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves, tell you who they are, where they're located, and how long they've served on the force. We'll start with you, Tammy.
Hi, I'm Tammy Gregory. I'm a police officer at the city of Refugio, and I have a 20 years of service, fixing to start 21. And I just, what I like most about the job is helping any citizens that might need assistance with information or anything that's in a positive manner for law enforcement.
I love that. Joe, what about you?
I'm Joe Hammond from New Jersey, Bergen County, New Jersey, and I served 20 years. Just recently retired July 1, thank God, and enjoying life right now while I'm actually helping other people overcome adversity, both on and off the job. That's what my, if you see the little tag after my name, JH Overcomes, it's JH Overcomes Adversity. I help people overcome adversity, both on and off the job.
Awesome. Next up.
Hi, I'm Michael Adams. I serve in Austin, Texas. I've been on the force for just over 9 years.
Awesome. And last but not least.
I'm Kalisha Kampf. I have been an officer for 5 years, and I currently work for Navasota Police Department.
So we've got a lot of variety here with different years served and a newly retired police officer as well. And, what I always think about with this job is, this is going to be a 2-parter question. One, I want to know, when did you realize that you wanted to be a police officer? But the second part is, what do you love most about the job? And so we'll start with you, Michael.
Okay. When I finally realized I wanted to be a police officer, I went to A&M, got a degree in kinesiology. The ultimate goal was some form of like physical therapy school or something like that. Honestly, my grades weren't good enough. So I got a job just here in Austin where my wife lived, working at a credit union. And that just wasn't, what I wanted to do ultimately with my life. I'd always had a desire to serve, help people. And I thought, the medical field would be a great way to do that. When that didn't pan out, my uncle is a police officer in Houston, almost 30 years long. So that was a field that interested me. I did a few ride-outs, found out that the job was fascinating, lots of thrill, but you obviously do get to help people every day. You're seeing somebody in need, that you're basically meeting them probably on their worst day of their life. And so you have an opportunity to help them at that point. And that was something that just drew me closer to the job, and I applied, and a few years later joined the academy.
And clearly you've enjoyed it because you've stuck with it. I love that, Michael.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
Kalisha, what about you?
So I was in college. I was a Spanish major at Sam Houston. And I got to my last semester and I went to get advised. And the advisor said, "You've taken so many criminal justice courses, you could be a double major." And I said, "Oh, I guess that interests me." And so I decided to do that. And I had a professor, and he was MP in the, I believe, Army. And he told a story about how they got a Pringles can and made it look like a radar gun to slow people down. And I'm thinking, wow, you can completely think outside of the box in this career. So I went into the federal field of law enforcement, absolutely hated it, took a 7-year sabbatical and worked for Child Protective Services, and then ended up back in law enforcement.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Tammy, what about you?
I was doing accounting before I was a police officer, but I have a twin sister who was in law enforcement. She was actually dating a awesome police officer, and she got into it. And then I did write-outs with her, and really liked what they did. And just found it interesting, and I thought, well, hey, why don't I try this out? So, and it's worked well.
I love that. And that's so okay. So is it an identical twin sister?
Yes, identical. She's actually still in the business. She's just reserving though, because she actually took a job at TxDOT, so she's actually off the streets. She's working for a college in Abilene.
I was gonna say, so y'all haven't worked in the same area, have you?
We have. We used to work both of us used to work in Williamson County, over in Georgetown, in the Austin area, and we both work for the same agency.
Well, I've got to ask then, did you ever have instances where y'all dealt with the same people and they were like, wait, I just dealt with you last week, and you're like, no, that was my sister?
Oh yes, that still happens, believe it or not, because she actually worked for Victoria Police Department when we came down to this area. But we used to handle calls together when we worked at Williamson County, and we actually had to deal with intoxicated subjects that we didn't mean to have fun with them, but
I was going to say, if they're intoxicated, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing double. And you're like, yep, that's how far gone you are.
yeah, it wound up being pretty comical.
I bet. I love that. Well, Joe, what about you? I mean, when did you know that you wanted to be a police officer, and what do you love? What did you love most about it?
Oh man, I was young. It was a young guy. I didn't have any police officers in my family. I was always that guy in the family who always wanted to do something different. The thing that, people always said, why do you want to do that? That was always me. So, I remember when I joined the police academy, actually, I was actually kicked out the first time because I had recently joined it after getting a kidney transplant. And what happened was I was on kidney dialysis for 5.5 years before that.
Wow.
And when I finally got the kidney transplant, I got hired right out the gate, and I went in, and I didn't make it through the first time because my body was still adjusting to it. But I was so excited, man. I got, the guy that kicked me out was actually somebody I went to school with. And he says, listen, man, he says, we don't need any heroes right now. We just need you to be healthy. So I was able to come out. I was able to work my way back in, finish the academy strong, go on to be a police officer. And for the last 20 years. And from that point on, man, it was just all fun for me. I loved doing what I did. I went on to, be a hostage negotiator with SWAT team, motorcycle cop, union president, all these things that came along with the job, but basically it when I was young, I knew right away exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah. It was just all about getting there, man. It was all about getting there.
Well, what I find so fascinating about being a police officer is, like many jobs, there's many things that we love about our job, and there's a reason we stick with it. But there's also a lot of difficulties. I know, Michael, you mentioned a minute ago, a lot of the people that you deal with, you're dealing with them on their worst day. Which adds a whole nother level of difficulty to your career. And, I wonder though, you deal with such a variety of issues. Like, it's never just like, oh, we can just prep for this one thing. And so, I think about my experience as an educator, and I'm like, oh, there's certain things I can prepare for. But as a police officer, even prepping for pulling somebody over, you could get 35 different characters when it comes to even doing something as simple as that. And so I'd love to know from you all about, what did you find as one of the more challenging aspects of your job? Tammy, we'll start with you.
Challenging. I don't know. I just, I guess, I'm sorry?
Showing up.
Oh, yeah. Especially nowadays. Right. I think that trying to work with people and get them to understand that if they have that experience with law enforcement, that to try and try and make sure that they treat each of us individual. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, our group of professionals get kind of thrown in one basket, and there's one bad apple, and we all become bad apples instead of seeing everybody as individuals. And I think that's one difficult thing trying to work through, especially nowadays, is letting them know that to treat everybody differently. And if, I was rude to them, or if I mistreated them or something, then treat me as an individual and make sure that they don't because a lot of times you'll be out on traffic or come in contact and they've had bad experience with law enforcement, or they've been treated poorly, and then they think you're going to treat them poorly too. So I think that's one of the most difficult, I would say.
You know, you bring up an interesting thing there too that I hadn't really considered too much, and you know, a lot of people that they do that with officers. They like to say, "Well, I had a bad experience once. Every officer is now on my bad list," and we don't do that with doctors or with the checkout person at HEB or Walmart. It's like, but yours does tend to be a field that happens, and I wonder why. That's such an interesting thing to think about. But you're right, Kalisha. What about you?
I think my hardest part, the hardest part of the job for me is seeing the change in people with narcotic use. I think that, I mean, there have been star football players that have had the opportunity to, you know, go to college on free scholarships, and next thing you know, they're running around butt naked trying to fight the air, you know? And so that's the hardest part for me, is knowing and not even just narcotics, but knowing the potential that people have, and seeing them just not reach for the brass ring.
Yeah. Now, you did mention earlier, right, that you worked for CPS for a few years as well?
I did.
So I would love to know, because that was a job that I considered going into, but I just didn't think I could handle it emotionally. What do you find is more difficult emotional wise? Did you feel like it was CPS work or being an officer?
Absolutely CPS.
That's kind of where I would lean to, because for me, it's just those kids and the fact that you
and it was funny. It was actually, it worked out perfectly because the police chief in Madisonville at the time, actually the assistant chief who works for Harris County somewhere now, but he approached me and he said, you know, we love the interaction that we have, and you do great investigations. Would you consider coming on? And it worked out perfectly because my daughter at the time was 2, and it got harder and harder to work these investigations in which these children were helpless and absolutely getting hurt and killed, and, you know, everything like that. So it definitely came at the right time, because it was, you know, when it's time to go. So, and it was time for me to go.
Yeah. Michael, what have you found to be one of the more difficult aspects?
I guess just personally, it's you know, seeing parents that kind of maybe use officers as a tool against their children. You know, it's like, hey, if you don't behave or something, that officer is going to take you away. You know, using us as a, you know, a disciplinary tool. I don't want children to fear me. I want them to, you know, see me as a helper who is out there, has their best interests at heart. Them to be able to, you know, run to me if they need help. You know, not run from me. You know, because I'm not out to get them. That's, you know, the absolute last thing on my mind. You know, I want to be a helper, and you know, it's one of those things. You know, it's just kind of overcoming the prejudice of, you know, all cops are bad. You know, the cop's gonna, you know, if you do any tiny thing, the cop's going to come get you. That's one of the most difficult things I've found.
Well, and I think that's such a good point that I've met so many officers that's what their goal is. They want to be a helper. And I loved as a principal when we would get to bring officers on campus to eliminate that stigma and to let them see that these are community helpers. Like, they are there to be your friend. They deal with difficult aspects, but they aren't there to get you. They're there to be helpers. So I thank you for sharing that, Michael. Joe, you know, what did you find to be one of the more difficult aspects for you?
You know what, Todd, is maintaining the human side of yourself. You know, we see a lot of ugly, man. You know, there is a, you know, we make fun of the T-shirt that says, you know, we fight the evil that you don't believe exists. You know, but realistically, there's such an evil out right now that, and has been, that the public is protected from. You know, and wearing the uniform, it does, you fight the change that it brings internally. You know, there is no way that you could, you know, do this job for 20 years and not be affected some kind of way, 5 years and not be affected. You know, we take psychological tests to get on the job, and at about 4 or 5 years, what happens after you've seen that first child death, or that first, you know, person struck by a car right in front of you, or the first victim that you really couldn't help that you were trying to get to, somebody drowns right in front of you. You know, there's so many different things that brings on the change inside of you that you have to fight to keep it down sometimes, you know, because the job itself will change you. And like, you know, like Tammy said, and like Michael said, you know, maintaining that, especially in today's time where, you know, I know one of my biggest struggles, like towards the end of the career, was just being a Black officer, you know, especially being with what was going on in the world, you know, having to, being looked at one way by, people of color. You're a sellout, you're Uncle Tom, you're a bunch of these things and that, but on the other side, you still have a job to do. And it was very, very difficult. Right now, it's probably the most difficult time to put that uniform on every day for these guys and girls. It's very, very difficult to go out because you feel so unappreciated. You go out and you try the best. I've watched some videos, man, where cops have just been completely abused and have had to take it and walk away. But you realize that, so what the public doesn't realize is that you have to take that home, and when you take that home to your family, man, it's very, very difficult to keep that part of you down, because certain things you don't want to share with your wife or your husband and your family and your kids. They're not built for that. They're not built for the things that we see each and every day, and nor should they be, nor should they. Well, do we expect them to handle that? But when it comes down to it, I think the hardest part, like towards the end, was trying to maintain who you really were, as good as you were throughout the rest of the time that you have there. Because I work with some great people, man. Like, seriously, I work with some really great cops, from here across the world. And I mean the world, from different parts of the world, and it's a shame that we get that tag put on us because we had a few bad people. And listen, there's some cops out here that should have never wore a uniform. Yeah. I will not listen. If I'd lying to you, if I told you that every cop deserved to wear the uniform, because they didn't. Clearly they didn't. And we've seen that. And now we have a whole country traumatized by it. But what I'm trying to say to you is that the hardest part was maintaining who you were when you first became that person that took the job in the first place.
Well, and you said so many good things in there that I hope people just think about and digest. And one of those is, and I think it goes with any profession. There are going to be people in any profession who are not a good example of that profession.
Sure.
Period. End of story. There is no profession that has always everybody been perfect. And I know that right now there's just so much vitriol thrown y'all's way that I can imagine taking all that home. And Joe, I want to ask you another question here, because something you said before we went live too is the amount of police officers post-retirement who don't make it very long. Talk to me about that real quick.
Sure. I've witnessed it several times where, and I'm sure these officers can speak to it also, officers, whether it be officers in their department or next door to them, whatever the case is. How many times do you see a police officer retire and then die after 5 years? Whether it be suicidal or whether it be, just bad health or not taking care of yourself, or just the mental stress of the job taking over. You have to, there's so many different things that these officers and these officers that you're looking at right now see on a daily basis. You can't even imagine what goes on in the first half an hour of a day. When you wake up, the first thing you do at a roll call is you're answering a bank robbery, and these are things that where you have to go from sitting down, eating pizza with the guys and girls, and all of a sudden, boom, you're snapping from one second to the next. And then you have to continue your day, after seeing something traumatic, after being involved with something traumatic, because a young child died in front of you, police work doesn't stop.
Right.
Okay. You have to come back the next day and you're expected to function, and a lot of times what happens is I'll be honest with you, I was a victim of it, where if you didn't talk about it, that was the thing to do. Don't talk about it, because if you talk about it, then you're going to be looked at as that guy or that girl who can't handle the job, as a weakness. And slowly but surely, we started to come out of that as I got towards the end of my career. And I love to see more of it now, where officers are now opening up and speaking more about, the things that they have going on inside of them. Because I got to tell you, Todd, some of the things that, the things that people have seen, the things that people do in this world that the average person will never, ever see, it's traumatic, man. It really is.
Well, and I think sometimes people can have this singularly view of a cop as what they've seen on the TV show Cops, and think that, oh, that's all you do all the time. And I think several of you have made a really good point about that some of the stuff that you see and handle and deal with, you can't bring up to a friend down the street. You can't, it's hard to separate yourself, and you can't come home to your family and carry it and pour it all on them all the time. And so I can just imagine that added pressure on top of especially now, often feeling like the enemy instead of the helper. And so, as we wrap this conversation up, I really wanted to ask each of you, what do you feel like is a misconception about being a police officer, or maybe something that you wish more people knew about what you do? We'll start with you, Michael.
I would say the fact that people think we're invincible. We're not. Everything affects us. It's not fun to go to a call where somebody's crying out for help. They're at their wits' end, and you don't make it in time. They've shot themselves. Or a baby chokes on something, and you're trying to do CPR on the baby. Baby doesn't make it. It's kind of one of those things that Joe was saying. Going back, I can picture every dead person I've seen.
Right.
I've seen 9 years worth of dead people, whether it just be natural causes, or just somebody committed suicide, or somebody who was killed, car crash or murder or something. It sticks with you. It's not something that I dwell on. Luckily, I have the ability to, when I kind of come home from work, I shut it off, and I'm not thinking about work anymore. Some officers don't have that ability, and they constantly dwell on things. And I think I'm lucky that I have the ability to just kind of shut it off, and I don't feel like I'm compartmentalizing or anything like that. But it's definitely still back there. It's something that does affect you.
Right.
So,
thank you for sharing that, Tammy. What about you?
Well, kind of working off of what Mike said, I'm the type of person where I can reset too. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it's because we have no other alternative, because like you said before, we couldn't share stuff. Not to mention, we don't want to put our families through having to listen to that, nor would they understand it.
Yeah.
So, but I think one of the things that I think people think is we like to go to work, we like to make arrests, we like to arrest people and put people in jail. And I think at least for me, right, it's exactly that. Far from it. That's not what we want to do.
Yeah.
Going to work, helping people, assisting in any way we can. Not arresting people is a good day for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a huge because I know I've heard people, you just like taking people to jail. No, we take people to jail when we have to, but that's not what we like. So I think that's a misconception.
I think that's powerful, and I'm glad that you said that, because I think that is what a lot of people think, and so thank you for sharing that. Kalisha?
I think that I want people to know that we're approachable and we're open for conversation. And when Michael said earlier that he doesn't want kids to think oh, I can't talk to the cops. I've had it. I've had situations in which I'm waving at a kid as I'm driving by, and their parents grab their arm and put it down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've never met you, I don't know you, but I'm going to stop the vehicle, I'm going to get out, and I'm going to have a conversation with you and your child to let you know that I am me. And when I introduce myself on the streets, you can call me Corporal Camp, or I prefer Kalisha. Just call me Kalisha and let's talk. You're having a bad day, you can't you're fiending for a cigarette, let me buy you a pack of cigs, man, we're gonna make this work. So I'm completely approachable, and I know all my guys are too. They love having conversations with the community and interacting with people, and we're just humans. We take off our uniforms and we bleed red.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Kalisha.
Funny story going off of what Kalisha said.
Michael.
Funny and sad story. I remember just being at Walmart one day. I was working a contract, and I saw a little boy, and I was waving at him. I had like a sticker I wanted to give him. He's probably 2 or 3 years old. He flipped me off. It was kind of one of those things where it's like off-putting, but at the same time, I was like, well, I mean, that's what you were taught. It's funny, but it's also sad. So it's out there.
It's kind of one of those things, like was said earlier, is, you may have had a bad experience with an officer at some point in your life, but that doesn't mean everybody's bad, because I could think about getting pulled over once in my life, and maybe the officer wasn't that friendly, but I didn't think every officer was like that, because I know I did wrong. So he probably wasn't very happy that he was having to deal with me. But I think that's that reminder of, kids are a product of who they're being raised by, but officers are all each their own individual person, and we should go up and say hello and be friendly and that kind of thing. And so what about you, Joe?
I think they summed it up, man. It's very, very hard for us to go to work every day and just like have to face this, like the things like he said. I've experienced that also, where a kid would wave his hand at me and his older brother would put his hand down and say, "Don't wave at him, he's a pig," or things like that. So, I think the one thing that I would love people to understand about police officers is, we're human beings. Okay, we are absolutely human beings.
Yeah.
We are not summed up by the few bad situations that you have seen. Of course, you have seen some bad things, and a lot of that is media, but some of it's us. Okay, let's call it what it is. But at the same time, we're human beings, and we bleed red, like Kalisha said. We want to be approached. We want to be talked to. But unfortunately, it's been something that has been put out there right now where they feel like we're not approachable. The biggest thing that you need to realize is that everybody that puts on that uniform is somebody's husband, wife, daughter, son,
Yep.
father, husband, so it's very, very important for, like me personally, I'm a single dad. I have a daughter at home, and my son who's in the military. But, my main thing was, making it home every day just to see her. So if they see us react a certain way, sometimes it's just because we have to. There's no other alternative for us to do. We have to make it home as well. And the biggest thing that they should realize is that we're just human beings, just like you are. No different, just doing a different job.
Well, I want to personally say to each of you, thank you for your service. Thank you for the work that you are doing and for continuing to get up and go to this incredibly difficult job that I know no matter how much you talk about it and tell people what you do, until they walk in the shoes of an officer, they will never understand the work that you do. So thank you for giving up time to have this important conversation with me. I appreciate all of you so much. I challenge anybody listening today, find an officer in your community, give them a high five. Well, probably not a high five or a hug right now. We are dealing with COVID, but go and tell them thank you for the work that they're doing. Be at least one smiling face that they can see and interact with today. And I hope that you all listening and watching have gained something from this conversation today too. Remember, you can check out any of the past Honestly Let's Talk episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or YouTube. All the episodes are there. To my 4 guests, thank you so much. And I will see everybody again next Thursday at 8 p.m. right here.
Thank you, Todd.